Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here. You know, as focused learners, we already know that the true foundation of all education is comprehension, right? I mean, if you literally don't understand the words being spoken, there's just no way you can grasp the concepts being taught. So today, we're going to decode a really fascinating policy from the Philippines, Department of Education Order No. 035, Series of 2025. Together, we're going to unpack exactly how language acts as a bridge, connecting high-level educational policy directly to on-the-ground, everyday classroom practice. So let me ask you this. What language do children actually learn best in? It sounds like a pretty simple question, right? But the answer to this pivotal question fundamentally shapes the trajectory of a child's entire educational journey. Just think about it. If you're trying to learn really complex new ideas, like math, science, or even just social dynamics, trying to do all of that in a language you don't even speak at home, that adds an incredible, almost unfair layer of difficulty. And look, this isn't just some abstract academic theory. As this quote perfectly highlights, mismatch between home language and school language has been linked to learning poverty in diverse settings across the globe. When a child's home language is just ignored in the classroom, they get stranded on this island of disconnection. They aren't just struggling to learn the actual subject, they're struggling to decode the medium of instruction itself. And solving this exact mismatch, well, that is what today's Explainer is all about. Okay, let's dive right into our structural roadmap for today. We're going to cover 5 key things. First up, why language mapping actually matters. Second, who exactly falls under the scope of this policy. Third, the 4-step workflow of how it's done. Fourth, the final classroom scenarios. And fifth, the people who make it all happen. All right, starting off with Section 1, why language mapping matters. Building the foundation. You know, before you can build any sort of bridge to better learning, you absolutely have to know what materials you're working with. And that brings us straight to the core definition of the language mapping process, or LMP. Basically, this is the systematic collection and documentation of the languages used by kindergarten to grade 3 learners. Why do we need this? Well, to inform the selection of the appropriate medium of instruction, or MOI. It is an absolutely foundational data gathering tool because you can't just guess what language a community speaks, right? You have to document it systematically to effectively align that home language with school instruction. This brilliantly illustrates the whole ecosystem. Notice how the core goal is right there in the dead center, making appropriate and strategic choices for early grade learners. But look at what's surrounding it. It's anchored by legal mandates and learning theories. And it's totally supported by technical guidance and community engagement. All of these interconnected dimensions revolve around one singular focus, which is choosing the right language to ensure absolutely no early learner gets left behind. Moving right along to Section 2, scope of the policy. Who does this guide? So exactly which learners and programs stand to benefit from this whole mapping process? The answer here is, well, it's radically inclusive. The policy covers all kindergarten to grade 3 learners, which DepEd calls Key Stage 1, in both public and private schools. But it doesn't stop there. It explicitly includes Indigenous peoples' education programs to preserve cultural integrity. It covers Philippine schools overseas. It applies to the alternative learning system, specifically the basic literacy program for out-of-school youth who might not speak the dominant language. And wonderfully, it officially recognizes and integrates Filipino Sign Language for deaf learners. So it's making sure that every specific context is recognized. Okay, on to Section 3, the 4-step LMP workflow, building the bridge. Now that we know who we're building this for, let's look at the actual engineering behind it. We're moving into the core operational procedure of the policy. The logic here is incredibly straightforward, and it carries a lot of momentum. Step 1, you collect the initial data through advocacy and enrollment forms. Step 2, if you need to, you confirm that data through specific validation tools. Step 3, you encode those verified results into the official national system. And finally, Step 4, you implement. You actually use that data to organize the classrooms. So it really goes all the way from simply asking a parent a question to completely transforming how a classroom operates. And here is the visual flow of that exact process. In the collect phase, over there on the left, teachers use the Basic Education Enrollment Form, and yes, the acronym is actually BEEF, which is great, to gather initial data from parents. Then, if things are a bit complex, they move to confirm using a language identification tool, or LIT. Now, the LIT might involve picture naming or reading a story. It's just a way to truly observe and hear a child's authentic voice and comprehension level in real time. Only when that data is rock solid does it get encoded, which then entirely dictates the final implementation.
So, the absolutely crucial point in all of this is this number right here, 70%. During that very first data collection phase, this specific percentage acts as a massive administrative fork in the road for schools.
Here's exactly how that fork in the road works. If the enrollment data shows that 70% or more of the learners in a grade share the exact same first language, boom, the school classifies it as a monolingual class. They get to fast track right past the confirm phase and proceed directly to encode. However, if it's highly mixed, meaning less than 70% share a dominant language, it's a multilingual class. They cannot just guess, they must proceed to the confirm phase and administer that language identification tool to individually validate the children's language profiles. Honestly, it's such an elegant way to save time where things are obvious, but demand precision where things are a bit more complex.
Which brings us to Section 4, Medium of Instruction Scenarios, the destinations. Once all that meticulous data is gathered, confirmed, and encoded, where does it actually lead? Let's look at the real-world classroom scenarios.
What I found genuinely fascinating about these 4 scenarios is how this system is designed to adapt to the community, rather than forcing the community to adapt to the system. In Scenario A, classrooms use Filipino and English primarily. Scenario B adds a regional language as an auxiliary support, but just look at Scenario C and D. If the data dictates it, the primary medium of instruction actually becomes the learner's first language, or their indigenous people's language, with only a gradual introduction to Filipino and English later on. The data literally shapes the instructional reality.
And finally, Section 5, who makes it happen? Roles and responsibilities. Because obviously, a bridge of this scale isn't built by a single person. It takes a highly coordinated community of educators and administrators working together. Let's break down who does what.
You can really see how this division of labor ensures a steady flow of data from the ground up. Teachers are absolutely on the front lines. They gather the data, administer the tools, and ultimately change how they teach based on the results. Then, school administrators oversee this on a campus level. The school's division offices, or SDOs, consolidate all this data and use it for critical tasks, like making sure the right teachers are deployed to the right schools. And finally, the regional and central offices handle the macro-level stuff, establishing repositories, securing funding, and using this nationwide data to continually refine national education policy. And to make sure this massive effort stays on track, the policy institutes a continuous cycle of monitoring and evaluation. They use the acronym CREAM to ensure the implementation is clear, relevant, economical, adequate, and monitored. Basically, this just means creating constant feedback loops, checking if the data is actually accurate, and measuring if early grade literacy is genuinely improving because of these appropriate language choices. Ultimately, when you really strip away all the acronyms, the forms, and the data encoding systems, the core philosophy of this policy is just profoundly empathetic. As the document itself states, the goal is the realization of every learner's right to be taught and to learn in their own language, thereby fostering equity, inclusion, and cultural pride across all learning communities. It is entirely about making sure that when a 5-year-old walks into a classroom for the very first time, they hear of which they recognize and understand. So, I want to leave you with this final, vital thought to just kind of chew on. How does recognizing a child's language today change their entire future? Language mapping isn't just some bureaucratic hurdle to jump over. It is the vital bridge connecting a child's unique background to their boundless potential. Thank you so much for diving into this with me today. I really hope this structured look brought some real clarity to a complex, but honestly, truly beautiful process. Keep learning, keep asking those big questions, and I'll see you in the next explainer.